he has come up with a great idea, which is the idea of how the diasporas of Latin America can contribute to the development of their countries of origin, which is very important because all these diasporas are created by violations of human rights. People escaping oppression come to the United States, or people undergoing a severe economic crisis also come to the United States. And Dr. Blanco has come up with an idea of how these diasporas can be like Prometheus that brought the light to the mortals, the people that can come and bring knowledge and technology to their countries of origin, thereby making a contribution for development. He has been the director of the Miami-Dade College in a Center for Caribbean and Latin American Initiatives, and right now he is working with at a foundation where he is actively engaged in developing projects in order to help his country of origin, Cuba, with ideas on development and projects on development. He has coordinated this program of research on the judicially articulated violations of human rights in Ecuador, which, as I mentioned this morning, is the first of a series of studies that we are going to conduct. The next one will be probably Venezuela, then Bolivia, and Argentina, and all the countries where this violation seems to be part and parcel of the regime's ideologies. Without much ado, I am going to please ask Juan Antonio to present the project and his panelists. Thank you.
Is this working?
No.
Now it's working. Okay. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here at almost 11 something, 11:10. Thank you, Beatriz, for being my friend and being so nice to me in these introductions. I'm embarrassed of all the merits that you are attributing to me. Nevertheless, I am not going to forgive you that you preempted the introduction to my presentation, because you took this marvelous quotation of Correa, which was also my idea to start this with this idiotic thing of one ruler to say explicitly that he believes, like in the old times, that l'état c'est moi, you know, I am going to be the executive branch, the judiciary branch, the legislative branch, and so on. It's such, you know, a great thing that Correa said that so candidly, that he laid out this paradigm of the new dictatorship of the 21st century, like former president, Ecuadorian President Osvaldo Hurtado used to call them, that I also thought, like Beatriz, to start my presentation with that. I am not going to punish you by repeating it. You know it by now. And as of the readers of this book will soon find out, there is also no difference between Correa's rhetoric and his presidential practice. The judicial practices carried out against various Ecuadorian citizens and now compiled in this book by 6 independent authors and with very different backgrounds are clear evidence on how far President Correa has implemented his dictatorial vision of the judicial branch of his country. The 6 cases we now present to you, unfortunately, represent not the exception, but the actual trend in the way that justice is administered under Correa. The commitment to the national constitution, international human rights covenants, and the democratic charter of the OAS are all conveniently swept aside to expediently punish those who dare to contradict the will of the autocrat and his servants. The Inter-American Institute for Democracy and the Inter-American Bar Association did not take up this research as a political task, but as an academic responsibility. In this book, you will not find political statements, but the objective and detailed reports of lawyers and scholars narrating 6 cases that experience pervasive intrusion of the executive branch in an already weakened and submissive judiciary. Throughout the book, the reader will get a closer look at the government of Ecuador's continuous attempts to harass, intimidate, persecute, neutralize, and put on trial members of every segment of Ecuadorian society: students, indigenous people, entrepreneurs, political dissidents, and whistleblowers on corruption. At the Inter-American Institute for Democracy, we are too familiar with a pattern of governance that is common in some degree or another to all governments that have embraced the so-called socialism of the 21st century. And I would like to dedicate these closing remarks at the end of today's session to that broader theme. What is the current connection between those regimes governed by the paradigm that Correa described and the broader arc of anti-democratic forces in the region and in the world? I am afraid that a prominent weakness of too many foreign affairs analysts is their fragmented vision of reality. The same way that many agencies in pre-9/11 USA failed to see the connecting dots between various ongoing events, some international experts now tend to separate their analysis of interconnected events as well as the behavior of some key players. Consequently, they keep addressing secondary questions on isolated processes instead of formulating a comprehensive vision of their significance. Allow me to present you with three brief reflections on this matter. My first remark is to raise a question. What is the present danger to democratic regimes throughout the world? From my perspective, we are facing a new unholy alliance between authoritarian and totalitarian states, some secular, some theocratic, some authoritarian-prone political parties, irregular terrorist forces, and international crime cartels, which are all linked to those totalitarian states and the irregular forces that they sponsor. During the Cold War, the issue of containing communism was the organizing idea for analysts and policymakers that cemented Western alliances. No new organizing idea will emerge until we see the dots now connecting these different players currently confronting the values of democracy and human rights throughout the world. Retired Lieutenant General Michael T. Flynn mentions in his recently published book, The Field of Battle, that an unstructured and loose alliance of countries and groups share their hatred of the West. I would add that not only those countries mentioned by Flynn, such as North Korea, Russia, China, Cuba, and Venezuela, but also others, such as Nicaragua, Syria, and Iran, are relevant players in that undeclared anti-Western alliance. Why was the cooperation with the DEA the first target to be attacked when the leaders of the so-called socialism of the 21st century came to power in Bolivia and Ecuador? How can a certificate of good conduct be extended to Havana while Venezuela, a country under close control of Cuban intelligence and military advisors, is heavily engaged in drug trafficking? When are we finally going to connect the dots? My second remark is about the pervasive strategy that these global actors pursue through different local parties with a Leninist approach to power. Political movements and parties, such as Alianza País in Ecuador or Podemos in Spain, seek to get elected only to start a process of gradually dismantling democracy. Following a careful political strategy designed by Fidel Castro immediately after the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of those types of parties and politicians was fostered by the millionaire financial support extended to them by the late Hugo Chavez when the value of a barrel of oil was beyond $110 in the global markets. Nothing could be clearer to that respect than the direct quotation of President Correa showing his twisted understanding of the unlimited powers that he claims he was allegedly granted to reign over the country. Once elected to the head of the executive branch of government, these dictatorial-prone politicians aim to blow up the pillars of a democratic regime, the separation of powers, and a system of check and balances among them, combined with full respect to personal liberties and legal due process. These political players see elections as just another way to achieve power, but they do not seek a provisional power. They aim to install themselves as a permanent power that from then on would guide a transition from a democratic regime to an authoritarian or even totalitarian regime. Those represent a new species of governments. For more than a decade, the alliance between all these anti-Western governments has made itself felt in regional multilateral institutions such as the Organization of the American States and the Council on Human Rights of the United Nations, where they have sought actively to occupy seats or to gather together so that their vote would have enough weight to block those resolutions that they don't like, because those resolutions expose their violations of human rights to the rest of the region or the world. These anti-democratic forces effectively concert their actions in those forums in an attempt to neutralize any criticism and even to attack their opponents. Unless we finally come to acknowledge that such an international anti-democratic collaborative coalition exists, we will not be able to identify and neutralize their tactics. My third brief and last remark is just another question. How can we identify these challenges at an early stage? What signs could we use to recognize when a particular government is starting to align with these anti-Western players? Simple. When they start to locally undermine the separation of powers and the system of check and balances between them. With Ecuador, this process started early under President Correa, but again, only a few were connecting the dots at that time. Thank you.